Hello again, my name is Sam Barker and this is part 2 of my Action Research Defense for the Kean University's Masters of Education program. We left off finishing up Chapter 3 and now we're going to get into Chapter 4, which is my gathering and interpreting data. So let's get into some results. When the independent t-test was conducted, the results were as follows. As you can see here, we have a very small p-value. And since this p-value is less than 0.05, there is a statistically significant difference between group 1, which was my engaged group grades, and group 2, which was my non-engaged group grades. This was a very exciting finding for me. It lets me know that there's a difference between the two, and it seems to be when a teacher is engaged with with students outside of class, there seems to be a positive impact on their grades. I was really excited to see this. As you can see from our table here, that the average for group 1 was around a 94 and the average for group 2 is around an 85. That's close to an entire letter grade, or that is an entire letter grade difference. And so that was very exciting to see. On this next slide, we have a graph of the data that across the bottom here we have our different participants, and the orange line, as you can see, is the non-engaged student average, and the blue line is the engaged student average. And this is a nice comparison because it allows you to see that in almost every case the blue line is going to be above that orange line, which means that the engaged grades are going to be higher than the non-engaged grades. I like this graph because it helped visualize what was happening, and only in very few cases did the non-engaged student average actually get above the engaged student average. Not many participants at all had non-engaged students scoring higher than engaged students, and that kind of corresponds with the data that we collected from our previous slide. In my paper, I have the raw data that was collected, and so if you want to reference that, you will by all means be able to do so. Okay, so now let's get into some findings and significance. What quite does this mean for our research? And so it seems to be that outside of class engagement by the teachers seems to increase, that should say student grades. Outside of class engagement seems to increase student grades. A couple of tentative theories here. One theory is that a relationship is needed for students to be able to learn properly. Students have to have a positive relationship with their teacher in order for there to be learning taking place. And so when a teacher engages a student outside of class, then that relationship is strengthened, because the student now knows, oh, well, my teacher doesn't just care about me for my grades. My teacher doesn't just care about me for what I can do for them. My teacher's here at my baseball game cheering me on. My teacher is willing to take time out of their afternoon to participate in this club with me, or whatever. That relationship is strengthened. And that is theorized to increase student grades. Also, another thing is that trust is built. Another thing that's necessary in order for students to learn is there has to be trust there. If a student thinks that a teacher is untrustworthy, that the teacher doesn't have the best outcomes in mind for their students, well, that is, that's rather scary. The student's not going to be able to learn from a teacher that they don't trust. And so these definitely go hand in hand. When the relationships are strengthened, trust is going to be built and learning is going to increase. So a couple of insights gained. Excuse me. I was fairly aware that a teacher that was engaged with their students inside of the class was going to see better results from their students grade-wise. However, I was a little surprised to see that relationship seems to also continue to happen for outside of class engagement. And since this is the case, since engaging with students outside of class tends to increase their performance, I think teachers should be encouraged to engage with students outside of class. There should definitely be things put into place that encourage that outside of class engagement. And I'll talk about those further in chapter 6, which are my chapter on implications. What exactly does this research imply? What should we do? And I think it implies a little bit of educational reform. We can definitely make some improvements here. One major improvement, like I said from the previous chapter, is that teachers need to be encouraged to engage with students, and specifically outside of class. It's a given that teachers should be engaged inside of the class at this point. However, I don't think enough emphasis has been put on outside of class engagement. So for example, lunch could be held for teachers in the cafeteria. They could be required, instead of maybe eating lunch in their own rooms or eating in the teacher workroom or whatever, teacher lounge. Maybe require or highly encourage teachers to have lunch in the cafeteria. Even if the teachers are sitting at a teacher table or what have you, they still have face time with the students. They're still eating in the same room. I think it kind of humanizes teachers in the eyes of the students. And I think that would be a great first step. Another thing that could happen is teachers should be incentivized to attend school events. One easy way to incentivize this is during the halftime of a basketball game, just somebody announces for the teachers to stand up and everybody kind of celebrates them or gives them a round of applause. Just something small, so the teachers are kind of encouraged and at the same time incentivized to go to these school events. Another thing that administration could do to encourage this outside of class engagement is just making sure that if a teacher wants to sponsor a club, that it should be very easy and supported by the administration. This may require a little bit of money to be given so that they can buy proper supplies. Also, adequate space should be provided to host these clubs. The appropriate resources. Just make it to where it's really easy for the teacher, because for a teacher to sponsor a club, that's going to take more hours for them. They're going to have to put in additional hours outside of the final bell. And since that is really important for teachers to be club sponsors, it should be easy and supported by the administration to sponsor those clubs. Okay, for my final chapter here, just conclusions, just wrapping everything up for my action research paper. Excuse me. So again, my question was, what impact does the teacher have on their students' in-class performance by engaging with them outside of class? Answer: students that had a lot of outside of class engagement with their teachers had better grades than their peers who were not engaged with outside of class. And excuse me. And so when teachers engage with their students outside of class, their grades tended to improve. I want to talk about a couple of limitations and how those kind of spawn additional research topics. So a couple of limitations was the small sample size. I only had 16 data points, which is drastically too low. I even extended my data collection period further than I thought I was going to, and I didn't have as much of a response as I wanted to. A couple of teachers also gave letter grades instead of number grades, and I couldn't really quantify that. So the small sample size definitely curtailed the results, possibly skewed them slightly. So one way to combat this is to conduct the same project but on a much larger scale, and hopefully hit areas in a much bigger geographical location. That would kind of help that limitation. Another major limitation is, which way does this relationship go? This project proved that there was definitely a relationship between teachers engaging with students in their grades. However, It could be the case that teachers are more likely to engage with students outside of class given that they're doing well in their class. There definitely can be a pull to engage with those students more so than the students that aren't doing well. And so I would be curious to know if a student was initially performing at a certain level, if they started to be engaged with highly by their teacher, would their grades improve? That would be another further study we could talk about to really kind of figure out which way this relationship went. And another limitation is participant bias. Sometimes it's a little bit easier for teachers to have the grade A students come to mind. When we're talking about grades, sometimes it's a lot easier to be maybe a little bit subjective and not completely objective when we're thinking about what students do we engage with the most, who's doing the best. So that can definitely be a limitation. So thank you all for listening. These following slides are my references. Feel free to pause the video and take a look at any and all of them. Thank you so much, and I hope you'll have a wonderful day.